really glad to be here. My name's Adam Jones. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer over at Vrify. Tweak the presentation title a little bit because I think this is a little bit more apt and actually very in line with the conversation that the gentleman were just having previously. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how mining can adapt its communication strategy to attract non-traditional investors, non-traditional capital, which is, I think, something that's on a lot of our minds right now. I have a unique lens to talk about this topic because I am non-traditional capital. Like this time last year, I had very little inclination to invest in the mining industry. As I've learned more about it, I'm now an avid investor. So I've been through an educational journey myself over the past year. And a big piece of that is thinking about, well, where is mining today? And it was actually really interesting, the discussion that was just happening now. What's the next big commodity to blow up this year? And there was 6. And actually, there's different angles in terms of the way in which you can kind of compare those different commodities. But I would argue that with the electric vehicle, renewable energy transition that's happening right now, inflationary environment, global insecurity and sanctions, and the recent global banking instability, mining really is more relevant than ever and has a really interesting opportunity ahead of it that if we manage it right as an industry, we can really capitalize on. The world is starting to cry out for critical minerals. And every time I log into LinkedIn, I see another graph showing how much copper we need in the next 10 years and how much copper we're actually going to have. And to me, that just really shows an opportunity that both governments, like political and public momentum is building for the mining industry, which is really something we haven't seen too much of before. So the big question is, how do we capitalize on that as mining companies? And we're all in the mining industry. It's very easy for us to point towards this electric car and say, look at all of the different critical minerals. We're going to need more of them. Where do they come from? It's very easy to hold up an iPhone and say, okay, well, we're going to need more metals to keep creating these. But I think that's the challenge. We have a lot of this top of funnel kind of content coming out, which are talking about the global need for minerals. But then when it actually comes for non-traditional capital investors researching projects, we're doing things very similar and creating content in a very similar way that we always have. So what are we up against? And I think this is one of the big questions is how do we open the door for that non-traditional capital? So we actually did a survey. We have 55 people working at Vrify, and about half of them are mining people, about half of them not. And this was there was a lot of positive feedback about the mining industry, but these were some of the negative pieces that we got. First one always seems to come up first. The Mount Poly mine tailing dam breach. Environmental destruction was a term. High risk and social sacrifices to pursue a career. We're conditioned to think that anything that causes visible damage to the environment is bad. I thought the coal comment about toxic waste, the metallurgical coal comment, was particularly relevant because it's so true. An old white man's game of mining appears in total contrast to making the world a better place. I don't know what they're talking about. There's lots of young white men here as well. So this is some of the perceptions we're up against. And this is not to hate on mining. Vrify wouldn't exist without mining. Our company we're a technology company. It was started by a gentleman named Steve DeYoung, who built Vrify to try and solve some of the problems we are going to be talking about today. And that company was called Integra Gold. And what he really understood a need for was, as he was going around the world raising money, was that the content that he would previously share in the more traditional mining content wasn't joining the dots for potential investors. And it wasn't giving them what they needed to hopefully learn enough about it and invest. So what's the problem? Well, one of the things we do when we hire a new employee at Vrify is we ask them to go to 5 mining websites and report back on what they've found. What is the value proposition of this particular mining project? And so many of them come back with, kind of like a general report to say, well, I know where the project is. I know what they're mining. There's a lot of very positive information, and I can tell you their share price. But then when I actually look into their monthly reports or their press releases or their AGM, I get lost in a wealth of technical information. And I think that's the challenge, right? We're presenting the same technical information in the same way to lots of different audiences, depending on, regardless of what their technical knowledge level is. And so, it's easy for me as the CRO of Vrify to point to PowerPoint and say, PowerPoint's the problem. PowerPoint is not the problem. if you go to a different industries and look at a PowerPoint presentation, it'll really zero in on a value proposition. Within a couple of slides, you'll come out of it with a very clear understanding of what that project is. So it's less PowerPoint, although obviously we'll talk about how you can do better than PowerPoint. But it's more so the storytelling that goes with the content that we're sharing. How do we take really technical, complex information and relate it back to people with different levels of understanding? And it's been actually interesting at Vrify recently. Steve and I, the CEO, have been raising capital for Vrify. So we've been going and meeting with VC tech investors. And the interesting thing is, we'll go in, we'll put our iPads down on the table, and then we'll start talking. And we'll talk about, how many people in this room have a Tesla? And of course, everybody in technology has a Tesla. It's like you've got to buy one to be a VC investor, I think. And it's a very simple concept, right? We don't have the metals to create more Teslas. You want more Teslas. It's an easy concept to understand. But how do we show the value of how to join the dots between that and actually the value of the Vrify platform and gaining more investors and engaging with stakeholders? So we start with this, the classic cross-section that we see in every single mining presentation and every single press release. And I've been sat in as an investor, I've sat in many presentations and I've heard a CEO say, as you can see here, and I've just been looking at this colorful diagram thinking, see what? I have no idea what's happening here. It's beautiful, but I have no idea what it means. So the first thing we do with our tech investors is we talk about, well, what actually is a cross-section? And so first of all, we put it into a 3D model. And the way I like to describe a cross-section is it's kind of if you think of the mining project as a loaf of bread, the cross-section is just the best slice. It's that juicy slice right in the middle. It looks the best. And hopefully it's the slice that we're going to be able to raise a lot of money for our project off the back of. So straight away, just by putting this cross-section into 3D, we're already probably, we might have lost half the room of non-traditional investors already. But straight away, they at least understand what they're looking at. But that's not the story. What is the story that this company is looking to tell? Well, the story this company is looking to tell is that in the past, between these two lines here, it's about a 200-meter zone, what they call the boiling zone. And that is in the past where mineralization has tended to occur for this project. And that's one thing to tell, but it's much better to be able to show that. So through using 3D technology here, I can actually zero in. I can tell people, look, mining's cool. It's like Minecraft. And really kind of emphasize what those deposits are and what's been found in the past. But that's not the exciting part of this project. The exciting part of this project for the company that have bought this mine is that in the past, the company before, for whatever reason, maybe it was cost, maybe it was they didn't have enough smart people on the team, for whatever, they didn't drill deep enough. And so the real exciting part of this project and why somebody should invest is because this company is going to come and extend these existing drill lines and hopefully find some great gold in this boiling zone. And now, I'm not here pitching you on a mining project. I wish I was, because this would have been a good one to pitch. But I'm here to talking about how we can take a very complex cross-section diagram and in 30 to 60 seconds explain to you as a non-technical investor how a very technical concept. And if we can do that effectively across the board with many of our different communities, stakeholders, then really that's going to change people's perception of mining, because it's going to educate people. They're going to understand a bit more about mining, and they're not going to just be thinking of, okay, how do I get to my Tesla? The next example I'm going to show is a little bit different. This is one of my favorite examples because there's a few different stories within one model. So there's two, we've got the alpha on the left here, the beta on the right, two different projects connected by this road. Now, as we zoom in, the challenge, this project was at the PEA stage when they created this model. And one of the challenges they had was if you just look to the left over the hill, you'll see there's a small mining community here. And I think, using technology to engage with investors is one thing, but also we know now for any successful mining project, there's many, many other steps we need to even go through before we can get to the investors. So what this mining community was concerned about was, are we going to be waking up every single morning and seeing this mine right in our face? Now, you can address this in one way, which is to go to the community, have the CEO talk to them and say, don't worry, this isn't going to affect your life negatively. Trust me, I'm a mining CEO. Or you can actually build this into 3D, present to the community, and show them physically that, look, here's where the mine's going to be. And actually, from your perspective, you're not going to be able to see the mine because it's built into the other side of the hill. And so something like this in a community discussion can be seriously invaluable in terms of being able to communicate, again, something that might be much harder to tell with a 2D map or something like that. And I'll show you one more example from this site. So as you can see, we've got our alpha, we've got our beta, and then in the middle here, we have our production facilities. Now, there was massive environmental pushback on this particular project. There's about a 4-kilometer drive from the mine site to the production facilities. So they were looking for ways in which how can we improve the sustainability of this particular project. And one of the things they did was they got electric trucks. So they've got these huge heavy trucks, but the most important thing they wanted to show here was actually that from the mine down to the production facility is downhill. So on the way down the hill, these trucks are generating electricity so that when they come back up the hill, they can use that electricity. So it's actually a very sustainable transport of any of the mine minerals. Again, just something simple to show, but hopefully as you're looking at this, you're thinking, oh, there's some things I could use this for within my own projects. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is the press release. So we see many of these press releases go out every day. And the press release is an interesting one because the press release originally, if you think about the purpose of the press release, is to add transparency to the industry. It's to make it so that when somebody puts a drill result out like this one here, they are meeting all of the regulatory and compliance requirements, that investors can know that what they're looking at is trusted information that makes sense and that they can make decisions based on. The irony of it is that over the years, as we've added different compliance and needs after BRIEX and some of the other things that came off the back of that, we've now ended up with press releases being this kind of 10 to 15 page document. You've obviously got your quote at the beginning saying how great the drill result is and how encouraging the results are. Then you've got your 2 pages of drill table, which, for a geologist, I'm sure they're going through avidly and analyzing everything. And we have a bunch of pages of disclaimers, maybe a couple of cross sections. But really what we've ended up with is this document that no one's going to read. Like there's very few investors and people who are going through every single line of a drill result table. And the other piece of it is they're often lacking a lot of the context that they need to make a decision. So we look at press releases for drill results a little bit differently. And I'll bring up a model here. So you can see this is the extent of the information provided in a typical press release for a given drill hole. So we can rotate around, we can have a look at where that sits. But the challenge is it's not telling the full story. So what's often not provided is where the metal occurs, the length of the drill intersection. And without this information, it's very difficult to know whether the mineralization is limited to a small high-grade vein a few meters across or distributed through a mineralized zone hundreds of meters wide. And you can see that the drill results are often in relation to the known mineral resources, and that's important as well. So it makes it easy to ascertain whether or not the results are expanding the existing mineral inventory or simply confirming what's already known. And also the type of rock is important as well, right? Do we want to be drilling into that really hard rock that takes us a long time, or do we want to be drilling into the nice crumbly rock, which is going to be much more efficient? So the grade of the metal or the content of a drill hole, it's often what makes the headline, but there's a lot of other factors that we need to consider. And as you can see, we can kind of go through with the investor, guide them through the different, and kind of go through a core check right there and then. The final piece, and this is probably the most important one here, particular for this specific press release, is where was this hole drilled? Is this drilled in an untested region, which potentially marks a new discovery? Or is it in an area that's been heavily drilled in the past? Is it over in this area? Well, in this case, no. It's actually over here on the right-hand side. And what's exciting about that is that, and also interesting about it is, when you look at the drill table in the press release, this isn't the biggest result, but it's actually the most important one. And so even though half the length, it's much more exciting because it's a brand new area. It's never been explored before. And again, that's the context that the investor is often going to miss. And then we can even bring in our classic 2D cross-section to show what that looks like, but then also show, hey, we're going to drill here, here, and here in the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for those results. What we've actually done at Vrify now is when a press release goes out for one of our clients, not only can they update the content and within 24 hours have all of the new 3D data into the model, they can also record a narrated video very similar to the one that I just went through, which they can then release alongside the press release. That is a great way of engaging more investors and people who might not normally fully understand what they're looking at with a press release and may not have the geological background to be able to go in and analyze a full drill table and find the good stuff. Okay, so on to the next example. It doesn't have to be opaque. It doesn't have to be confusing for investors. And so really, our goal here is to be able to allow mining companies to create content which is going to align with the experience levels of people from lots of different backgrounds. And you can, of course, add Vrify to your press release for transparency. So this is where Vrify began. This was the first project that we ever did. This is the Lamaque project in Quebec. Steve and the team created this model. Steve, the CEO, actually saw a 360-degree image at the Rio Olympics back in, I don't know, in 2014 or something, and thought, that'd be really good for mining. So we went ahead, got a drone photographer, built this out. There was a lot of different challenges. There's a lot of different challenges with this project, one of which was there was a hotel over here that had a lot of concerns. They also wanted to see, they bought this processing plant that they wanted to show people around, but didn't want to have everybody to have to travel to site to see it. But what was interesting about this one from an educational standpoint is that they bought two old big mines, and then they made a discovery a couple of miles down the road. And through that discovery, they were having lots of conversations, trying to raise money with investor groups. They were having community engagement discussions. They were, lots of different stakeholders involved as they were trying to get this project permitted. But what was interesting about it was the most effective piece of content they actually used was this one. And so they actually invited communities without having to go underground into the mine. And what I like about this example is in one picture here, we can address a lot of different audiences and create and talk to content that they'd be interested in. So, a lot of investors or geologists are interested in that vein there. They're interested to see what the vein might look like if we rotate around and, obviously look for expansion. There's engineers and analysts who are actually probably more interested in the rock bolting up here and how much of that is required in this particular type of rock and how efficient the project will be. There's other investors who are interested in the actual the different machines that are going to be used to do the drilling, how quickly that'll operate, how fast it'll work. And so in this one image, Steve and the team at Integra was able to engage with multiple different groups. And I think that it just nicely summarizes really what I'm talking about today, which is it's not about having the best technology. Yes, the technology helps, but it's about being able to relate that message back to your audience, whoever that may be, and give them a greater level of comprehension and understanding around the project so that they feel in an educated place and they can actually invest in the future. And that goes the same for ESG groups, community, government, when you're going through permitting. Having this type of technology at your fingertips will help you tell those stories. But obviously, you have to be able to tell those stories effectively as well. That's the other part of it. So is technology the answer? Does technology unlock the door to that non-traditional investor that we're all trying to engage right now? Well, I'm obviously biased because I work at a technology company, but I would still say the answer is yes. But it's not just the technology. It's having a more formal communication strategy where you're actually thinking through the different audiences that you're going to be talking to. It's not going into every single meeting with the same PowerPoint presentation. It's actually being able to adjust that presentation to tell a different story, to address a different question. And that's really, so I think there's two things. It's the intent, which comes with understanding that we're not just marketing to the same people, and that mining companies maybe in the past have been guilty of kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. And then it is combining that with the right technology to be able to tell the visual stories of the projects and hopefully increase that investor pool. Okay. So that's all I've got, but I would love to hear any questions if there are any.
So this could help transparency, but it could also be, the new gold mine standing next to the liar.
Yeah, it could. I won't name the company, but we were talking to a company recently about Vrify, and they said, "This is great. We'd love this to tell our story, but is there any way we can remove this glacier from the middle of the mine?" And and we've heard, "Can you just crop out this community here from the model?" And so what comes with it is transparency. But yeah, obviously, in order to be able to tell an effective story, whether you're using Vrify or PowerPoint, you need to have the story to tell. You need to have the narrative ready to go. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Depending on the stage of your project, depending on what the story is you have to tell, sometimes too much transparency can be a bad thing. If that's
and I'm just fascinated. What kind of discussions do you have with groups like the OSC about how you work with them to try to be a part of that improved transparency, rather than providing tools that people can use to misinform based on the technical information they're required under law to disclose?
Yeah, and so of course all of the data that we are compliant with all of the data that goes in here. We're not creating data. This is data taken from Leapfrog or any other model, and the photography is obviously photography. So we're working with about 135 mining companies globally, and all of the data that goes into the models has to be, is public disclosure data. So we're fully accurate in terms of the information we're putting in. The way that they wish to use that data to tell the story is then up to the company. But yeah, we'd love to work with the OSC to ensure accuracy, not just in the 130 companies that we work with, but all mining projects globally. And I think we even work with some investment groups that have started requesting that, having a verified model accessible within their term sheet for that exact reason, to build that transparency.
No, it's good.
Yes, sir.
What's the pricing for your service?
Yeah, so it is a little bit project specific, but we charge a flat fee and it's a monthly subscription. And the reason it's a monthly subscription is that we include unlimited 3D updates. One of the challenges is, you go and pay 30 grand for a video or something, and then 6 months later that video is out of date and you no longer want to use it. So with Vrify, once the initial data is put in there, we will continuously update that every time you have a drill result. And within 24 hours of the result, you get us the data beforehand. We can actually have the model updated and ready for the press release. And the monthly fee, it ranges from about 4K USD to about 6K USD a month. It just depends on the size, complexity of the project, how big the team is, how much training is required, all of that stuff. And then obviously if you have multiple assets and different projects all over the world, then yeah, the pricing will fluctuate a bit. All right, thank you very much, everybody.